The following content examines a real criminal case involving violence and loss of life. Out of respect for the victims and their families, viewer discretion is strongly advised. April 14, 2003. A couple walks along the rocky shores of San Francisco Bay. They're about to discover something that will break a nation's heart. A body, washed ashore, badly decomposed, missing its head, forearms, and one leg. But this discovery didn't begin in April. It began 112 days earlier, on the most sacred family holiday of the year, Christmas Eve, 2002, Modesto, California. A pregnant woman leaves for a walk with her dog. She never comes home. Her name was Lacey Denise Peterson, 27 years old. 8 months pregnant with a baby boy she'd already named Connor. By sunset, she would be gone. Her husband said he went fishing. Police said his story didn't add up. The media said it was the perfect marriage. But someone was lying. December 9th, 2002, 15 days before Lacey vanished, Scott Peterson makes a phone call to his girlfriend, a woman his wife knew nothing about. He tells her, "This will be my first Christmas without my wife." Lacey was still alive when he said that. Welcome to True Crime Minds Studio. Tonight we explore a horror so sinister, it's etched in your memory forever. If you're ready to dive deep into cases that expose the darkest corners of human deception, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've heard of this case before. Now, let's get into it. Every murder investigation begins with a simple question. Who was the last person to see the victim alive? In this case, that answer would become the key to everything. December 24, 2002, 593 Covina Avenue, Modesto, California. Lacey and Scott Peterson had been married for 5 years. They were weeks away from becoming parents to their son, Connor. By all appearances, they were living the American dream. That morning, Scott Peterson told investigators that he left home around 9:30 a.m. to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina, about 90 miles away. He said Lacey planned to walk their dog, a golden retriever named Mackenzie, in nearby East La Loma Park, then do some grocery shopping and baking. When Scott returned home around 5 p.m., Lacey wasn't there. Her car was in the driveway. Her purse was inside. At 5:17 p.m., he called Lacey's mother, Sharon Rocha, asking if Lacey was with her. By 5:48 p.m., Sharon Rocha had called the Modesto Police Department to report her daughter missing. What began as a missing person case would soon become one of the most scrutinized criminal investigations in American history. In the hours and days that followed, thousands of volunteers flooded Modesto to search for Lacey. Her face appeared on missing person posters throughout California. The case quickly captured national media attention. A beautiful pregnant woman vanishing on Christmas Eve struck a chord with the public. Scott Peterson appeared at press conferences pleading for his wife's safe return. To many, he seemed like a devastated husband desperate for answers. But investigators were already beginning to look more closely at the last person to see Lacey alive. And what they were about to discover would expose a secret so shocking it would turn America's sympathy into suspicion overnight. Scott Peterson was hiding something that would prove he wasn't the man he pretended to be. Within hours of Lacey's disappearance, detectives noticed something disturbing. Scott's story wasn't just inconsistent, it was impossible. Scott claimed he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina on Christmas Eve, a 90-mile drive from his home. But December 24th was cold, rainy, and windy. Investigators questioned why anyone would travel that far to fish in such poor conditions, especially when Lacey was so close to her due date. When detectives examined Scott's newly purchased 14-foot aluminum boat, they found his fishing story had more holes. The boat showed little sign of use. Scott claimed he was fishing for sturgeon, but he had the wrong type of lure. He couldn't provide specific details about where exactly he fished or what he caught. Cell phone records placed Scott in the Berkeley area around the time he said he was fishing, but other details began to emerge that painted a troubling picture of the Peterson marriage. December 30th, 2002, 6 days after Lacey's disappearance, a massage therapist named Amber Frey makes a phone call that will shatter Scott Peterson's carefully crafted image. She tells investigators she's been dating Scott Peterson since November. He told her he was single. He described himself as a widower who had lost his wife and was dreading the holidays without her. But Lacey Peterson was still alive when he said those words. The revelation explodes across national media. The grieving husband was living a double life. He had a girlfriend. He'd been planning a future without Lacey. And he'd told Amber his wife would be gone before Christmas, 2 full weeks before Lacey actually disappeared. On January 24th, 2003, Amber Frey steps in front of cameras at a press conference. Her voice shakes as she reveals the depth of Scott's deception. But then she says something that changes everything. She's been recording her phone calls with Scott, working with police. For weeks, Scott has been calling her, professing his love, maintaining his innocence, all while his pregnant wife remains missing. December 9th, 2002, 15 days before Lacey vanished. Scott calls Amber from a holiday party, Lacey's office party. He tells Amber he's calling from Paris, that this will be his first Christmas without his wife. Scott Peterson wasn't psychic. He didn't accidentally predict his wife's disappearance. He planned it. The revelation of Scott's affair changed everything. Public opinion shifted dramatically. The grieving husband was now the prime suspect. But investigators still faced a critical problem. They had no body, no crime scene, and no physical evidence of a murder. Throughout January, February, and March of 2003, the search for Lacey continued. Divers searched the Berkeley Marina and surrounding waters. Cadaver dogs were deployed. Investigators combed through hundreds of tips, but there was no sign of Lacey Peterson. Weeks turned into months. The case was growing cold. Without a body, prosecutors couldn't charge Scott Peterson with murder. He knew it. They knew it. And then, on a quiet Sunday morning in April, the Pacific Ocean gave up its secret. April 13th, 2003. What washed ashore that morning would prove what investigators had suspected all along, and it would appear in the one place that connected everything back to Scott Peterson. A couple walking their dog along Point Isabel Regional Shoreline in Richmond, California, made a discovery that would break the case wide open. The body of a full-term male fetus washed ashore among the rocks. The location was significant. Point Isabel is approximately 1 mile from the Berkeley Marina, the same place Scott Peterson claimed to have been fishing the day Lacey disappeared. The next day, April 14th, a second body was discovered roughly 1 mile north of where the infant was found. It was the badly decomposed remains of an adult female. The body was missing its head, forearms, and left leg. Investigators believed these body parts were intentionally removed. DNA testing confirmed what investigators suspected. The bodies belonged to Lacey Peterson and her unborn son, Connor. After 112 days, the mystery of what happened to Lacey had been answered. But now, investigators needed to prove who was responsible. On April 18, 2003, California Highway Patrol officers spotted Scott Peterson's vehicle on Interstate 5, heading south. He was in San Diego, just 15 miles from the Mexican border. When officers pulled him over and searched his vehicle, what they found suggested this was no ordinary trip. His hair was dyed blonde. He'd grown a goatee. In his Mercedes, his brother's driver's license, $15,000 in cash, multiple cell phones, camping equipment, survival gear, a shovel, and a map to Amber Frey's workplace. Scott Peterson wasn't running from grief. He was running from justice. Scott Peterson was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder, first-degree murder for Lacey and second-degree murder for Connor. He pleaded not guilty, but the evidence suggested a man who was planning to disappear forever. The nation demanded answers. The prosecution promised justice, but proving murder without a confession, without witnesses, without a clear cause of death, that would require something extraordinary. What happened next would become one of the most watched trials in American history. And it would all come down to one question: can you convict a man of murder when the only evidence is his lies? June 1st, 2004. The world was watching, but what the jury was about to hear would prove that sometimes the absence of truth speaks louder than any confession. The trial of Scott Peterson began in Redwood City, California. The case had been moved from Modesto due to extensive pretrial publicity. For 5 months, the nation watched as prosecutors and defense attorneys presented vastly different narratives of what happened to Lacey Peterson. Lead prosecutor Rick DiStasso argued that Scott Peterson murdered his pregnant wife on or around December 24, 2002, and dumped her body in San Francisco Bay. The motive: Scott wanted to be free of his responsibilities as a husband and father. He wanted to be with Amber Frey. The prosecution's case was largely circumstantial. They presented evidence of Scott's affair, his suspicious behavior, his lies to investigators, and the location where the bodies were found, remarkably close to where Scott claimed to be fishing. Amber Frey took the stand and testified about her relationship with Scott. Working with police, she had recorded phone calls with Scott after Lacey disappeared. In these calls, Scott continued to lie, professing his love for Amber while maintaining his innocence in his wife's disappearance. The jury heard Scott tell Amber he was in Paris for New Year's Eve, when he was actually at a candlelight vigil for his missing wife. They heard him say he wanted a future with her, while investigators were searching for Lacey's body. Defense attorney Mark Geragos argued that Lacey was kidnapped and killed by someone else. He pointed to a burglary that occurred in the neighborhood and suggested Lacey may have been an accidental witness. The defense maintained that Scott's affair, while morally wrong, did not make him a murderer. On December 26, 2002, 2 days after Lacey vanished, a burglary occurred directly across the street from the Peterson home. The Medina family's house was broken into, items were stolen, and according to later witness statements, the burglars were using a brown van. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a brown van in the neighborhood on December 24th, the day Lacey disappeared. One witness, a local mailman, told police he saw Lacey walking her dog that morning around 10:30 a.m., more than an hour after Scott claimed to have left for fishing. This contradicted the prosecution's timeline. If Lacey was alive at 10:30 a.m., and Scott's cell phone records placed him already on the highway by 10:30, could he have killed her? The defense tried to introduce this evidence, but the judge ruled much of it inadmissible, calling the burglary connection speculative. The jury never heard the full details of the Medina burglary, the brown van, or the mailman's testimony that Lacey was alive after Scott left town. Without this evidence, the case went to the jury with a seemingly airtight, circumstantial case. But decades later, these unanswered questions would form the basis of Scott Peterson's innocence claims. The case went to the jury on November 3, 2004. After 7 days of deliberation, on November 12th, the jury reached a verdict: guilty. Scott Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Lacey and second-degree murder in the death of Connor. In December 2004, the same jury recommended the death penalty. The case was closed. The killer was caught. Justice had been served. America could finally move on, or so everyone thought. 20 years later, new evidence would surface that would force us to ask an impossible question. What if we got it wrong? In 2024, something happened that no one saw coming. An organization known for freeing the innocent turned its attention to the most hated man in America, and what they found would shake this case to its core. In 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned Peterson's death sentence, citing jury selection errors, though his conviction was upheld. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2021. For years, the story ended there. Scott Peterson, convicted murderer, Lacey and Connor, tragic victims. But then, in 2024, something unexpected happened. The Los Angeles Innocence Project, an organization that has freed dozens of wrongfully convicted individuals, announced they were taking on Scott Peterson's case. They uncovered something the jury never heard, something that was withheld during the trial. On December 26, 2002, 2 days after Lacey disappeared, a burglary occurred directly across the street from the Peterson home. 3 men broke into a home on Covina Avenue, the same street where Lacey lived. They stole a safe and fled. But here's what makes this significant. The burglars were arrested weeks later, in their possession items from multiple homes, and when questioned, witnesses reported seeing a suspicious van on Covina Avenue on December 24th, the day Lacey vanished. The Innocence Project argues that Lacey may have witnessed the burglars casing the neighborhood, that she was abducted to silence her, that Scott Peterson's trial was fundamentally unfair because this evidence was never presented to the jury. They're demanding new DNA testing, seeking access to evidence that was never fully examined, pointing to timeline inconsistencies. Could Scott Peterson be innocent? Or is this a last desperate attempt by a convicted killer for the Rocha family, Lacey's mother Sharon, her father Dennis, her brother Brent? This new development reopens wounds that never fully healed. They remain convinced of Scott's guilt. They believe justice was served. But now doubt has been introduced into a case once thought closed. Lacey Peterson was more than a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, an expectant mother. She loved gardening, cooking, and Martha Stewart. She was excited to become a mother and had already decorated Connor's nursery. Her life was taken too soon. Her son never got the chance to take his first breath. And while the legal system has rendered its judgment, the full truth of what happened that Christmas Eve may rest only with Scott Peterson himself. This has been the story of Lacey Peterson. May she and Connor rest in peace. What do you think? Was Scott Peterson guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? Or does the new evidence create reasonable doubt? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this deep dive compelling, make sure you're subscribed to True Crime Minds Studio with notifications on. We explore the cases that challenge everything we think we know about justice. Check out these other cases that shocked the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, the truth is rarely as simple as it seems.
As the Pulaski County Sheriff Crime Scene Unit combs through this home in Scott, real estate agent Stacy Medlock is searching the surrounding area.
We just want her safe. We want her safe, back with her family.
Medlock and dozens of other agents posting flyers asking for information and looking for leads to find their missing colleague.
If they have seen anything, any kind of vehicles, anything, let the police know.
Pulaski County Sheriff's officers called to this home around 9:30 Thursday night by Beverly Carter's husband after he hadn't heard from her for several hours.
It's a reality check, actually, to make sure people know where we are and who we are showing property to.
When he had last last spoken with her 4 hours earlier, she was planning on showing the home to a client.
She did actually call and make the appointment, and I believe that they're checking out all the records.
According to officers' reports, Beverly's husband found the scene much like this, her car in the driveway with her purse locked inside, but the door to the home wide open. When he searched the house, he found no sign of his wife.
It's 9:15 p.m. on a Thursday night. Police are racing to a property outside Little Rock, Arkansas. A real estate agent has vanished. Inside the house, investigators find something that makes their blood run cold. Drag marks in the dust, signs of a struggle, and outside, her vehicle. Purse inside, phone gone. The agent never left, but someone else did. For 5 days, investigators would race against time to find her. What they discovered would expose a conspiracy so calculated, so twisted, that it would shock even seasoned detectives. But by the time they found her, they were too late. This is the story of Beverly Carter, a successful real estate agent, a devoted mother, and the target of predators who chose her for one reason, because she worked alone. But there's something else, something that didn't come out until the trial. A detail so disturbing it would reveal this wasn't just one killer, it was two. And what they did to Beverly Carter would expose the dark truth about a profession where trust can be deadly. But I have to warn you, this story doesn't go where you think it does. September 25th, 2014. Let me take you back to the beginning. This is where Beverly Carter worked, Cry-Lika Real Estate in North Little Rock. And Beverly, she was one of their stars. Beverly was in their top 10 agents statewide. In 1 year alone, she sold $12 million in real estate. But what made her special wasn't the numbers. It was how much she genuinely cared about people. She wasn't just selling houses. She was changing lives. 50 years old, married for 35 years to her husband Carl, 2 sons, Carl Jr. and Taylor, a grandmother. By all accounts, Beverly Carter had built a beautiful life. Her son Carl would later say his mom was the heart of their family. She had this energy, this warmth that just drew people in, and she loved what she did. Real estate wasn't just a job for her, it was a calling. That Thursday morning, Beverly won $50 in a company competition, small victories. She had plans to finish work early, grab dinner, and head home. She had no idea she had less than 12 hours to live. But at 2 p.m. that afternoon, Beverly's phone would ring, and the voice on the other end. It belonged to someone who had been watching her, studying her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The call came in just after lunch. A potential client, a man who said his name was Stephen Adams. He and his wife were relocating to the area. They wanted to see a property, 14202 Old River Drive in Scott, Arkansas. Scott is a farming community about 15 miles from Little Rock. Houses scattered across fields. Quiet, isolated. Now here's where Beverly did everything right. Her son Carl recalls that his mom was aware of the risks. She asked if the wife would be there. The man said yes. He even put his wife on the phone to talk to Beverly, to reassure her she wouldn't be meeting a man alone. They agreed to meet at 6 p.m. Before she left the office at 5:30, Beverly called her husband. She told him the address. She told colleagues where she was going. She wrote everything in her notebook, the time, the email address, the phone number. Beverly followed the protocols. She took precautions. But what Beverly didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Stephen Adams didn't exist. And the couple waiting for her at that house, they weren't looking to buy. They were looking for a victim. By 6:15 p.m., Beverly Carter would be inside that house, and within minutes her entire world would explode into violence. What happened in those first moments would determine whether she lived or died. But there's something investigators would discover later, something that would prove this attack had been planned down to the last detail. Beverly arrived at the property right on time. 6 p.m., she parked her brown Cadillac SUV in the driveway. grabbed her notebook, and walked toward the front door. What happened next, we can only piece together from evidence left at the scene. By 8:30 p.m., when she hadn't answered any calls or texts, her husband Carl knew something was wrong. Carl Jr. remembers getting the call from his dad saying Mom wasn't responding. He wasn't too worried at first. His dad could be protective. But to ease his mind, he drove to her office. The parking lot was empty. The building was dark. And that's when he felt it, this sinking feeling in his stomach. Something was very wrong. Meanwhile, Carl Sr. had driven to the property on Old River Drive, and what he found there would confirm his worst fears. Beverly's SUV was in the driveway. The front door to the house was wide open, but Beverly was nowhere to be seen. At 8:45 p.m., Carl Jr. called 911. What police found inside that house would make it clear. This was no ordinary disappearance. The evidence told a story of violence, of struggle, of something calculated and cold. But the most chilling discovery, it was still lying in Beverly's vehicle, hidden in plain sight, a clue that would crack this case wide open. When investigators from the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office arrived, they immediately knew this was a kidnapping. The dust on the floors told a story, footprints, drag marks, and in the foyer, a pattern that suggested someone had been lying on the ground. Someone had struggled here. Inside Beverly's vehicle, everything appeared untouched. Her purse, her credit cards. But investigators found something crucial, her notebook, with the appointment details, an email address, and a phone number. That phone number would crack this case wide open. But what investigators didn't know yet, what they wouldn't discover for 5 agonizing days, was that they weren't just looking for one suspect. They were looking for 2. Within 48 hours, that phone number would lead police straight to a suspect. But when detectives sat down across from him in the interrogation room, what he told them would be far more disturbing than they ever imagined. Because this wasn't just about kidnapping, and Beverly Carter wasn't his first target. The hunt was on. September 26th, day 2. While Beverly's family organized search parties and made desperate pleas on the news, investigators were working around the clock, tracing that phone number, cell phone records, tower data, a digital breadcrumb trail that painted a picture of someone's movements the night Beverly disappeared. And it was all leading them to one man, a 33-year-old from Jacksonville, Arkansas, with a criminal history and no connection to Beverly Carter, Aaron Michael Lewis. But here's the thing, and this is important. Lewis was a complete stranger to Beverly. She'd never met him, never spoken to him before that phone call, so why target her? The answer would turn out to be chilling. What investigators didn't know was that Lewis had been researching Beverly for weeks. He knew where she worked, what she drove, how much her houses sold for, and when police finally got him into custody, he would tell them something that would make every real estate agent in America look over their shoulder. But first, they had to find Beverly, and time was running out. September 29th, day 4. Police had enough. They arrested Aaron Lewis and charged him with kidnapping. But Beverly was still missing, and investigators had one critical question. Is Beverly Carter still alive? And if so, where is she? In the interrogation room, Aaron Lewis did something that shocked even veteran detectives. He talked. A lot. When investigators asked why he targeted Beverly Carter, his response was chilling. Because she was just a woman that worked alone, a rich broker. Think about what he just said. Beverly wasn't targeted because Lewis knew her. She was targeted because of her profession, her perceived wealth, and because she worked alone. She was prey. But then Lewis played investigators something that would haunt Beverly's husband for the rest of his life. A voicemail. Beverly's voice, forced to record a message for her husband. In the recording, Beverly's trembling voice said, "Carl, I've been kidnapped, but I'm okay. I haven't been hurt. Just do what he says and please don't call the police. If you call the police, it could be bad. Just want you to know that I love you very much." Carl Sr. would later say he never got that call. It went to voicemail and he was too busy trying to find her to check. If he'd heard it, if he'd heard her say not to call police, he doesn't know what he would have done. Hearing that message played in court months later, that was the moment he broke. In the interrogation room, Lewis kept insisting Beverly was alive, but he was playing games, enjoying the attention, taunting investigators. When asked if he was guaranteeing Beverly was alive, Lewis responded, "Depending on how long it takes. How long can a person survive without food and water since yesterday? You'll figure it out." Time was running out. Investigators were working the cell phone data, tracking locations, analyzing every piece of evidence. And then, on day 5, the cell phone data would lead investigators to a location Lewis knew intimately, a place he'd worked, a place with hidden corners and forgotten spaces. And what they found there would answer the question everyone had been dreading, but it would also raise a new one. If Lewis did this, why was there evidence of a second person's involvement? September 30th, day 5. Using cell phone data and information from Lewis's interrogation, investigators were led to an abandoned concrete plant in Cabot, Arkansas, about 30 minutes from where Beverly had vanished. This was a place Aaron Lewis knew well. He used to work here. At approximately 2 p.m., searchers found what they'd been dreading, a shallow grave. Deputies worked through the afternoon and into the night, on their hands and knees, carefully excavating Beverly's remains. Carl Jr. recalls that when they told the family they'd found her, they already knew, but hearing it made it real. His mom, this vibrant, loving person, was gone. The autopsy revealed how Beverly died. Asphyxiation. Duct tape had been wrapped around her head, covering her nose, her mouth. She had suffocated, unable to breathe, unable to scream. With Beverly's body recovered, the kidnapping charge against Aaron Lewis was upgraded to capital murder. But investigators were about to uncover something that would change everything they thought they knew about this case. Because buried in the cell phone records was a pattern investigators had almost missed. Text messages, phone calls, all pointing to someone else, someone who'd been there from the very beginning, someone who had spoken to Beverly on the phone and convinced her it was safe, someone Lewis trusted enough to plan a murder with. October 2nd, 2014. Just 2 days after Beverly's body was found, investigators made a second arrest that would stun everyone following this case. Crystal Lowry, 41 years old, Aaron Lewis's wife. As investigators continued analyzing the cell phone records, they found communication between Beverly's phone and Crystal's phone. It became clear that Crystal Lowry had participated in the planning and execution of Beverly's kidnapping, which resulted in her death. This wasn't a lone predator. This was a conspiracy. The woman who had spoken to Beverly on the phone, reassuring her that she wouldn't be meeting a man alone, was part of the trap. She was the accomplice. She helped lure Beverly to her death. Carl Jr. remembers that when they found out Lewis's wife was involved, that she'd helped plan this, that she'd spoken to his mom on the phone. It was sickening. His mom trusted her, believed she was meeting a couple, and all along. But here's what no one knew yet. Here's what wouldn't be revealed until Crystal Lowry agreed to testify months later. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a calculated plan. Lewis and Lowry had spent 2 weeks researching potential victims. They had a profile, specific criteria they were looking for, and Beverly Carter fit every single requirement on their list. But why? What was the motive? The answer would come out at trial, and it would be even more twisted than anyone imagined. 10 months later, Crystal Lowry would take the stand and reveal the full scope of their plan: a kidnapping for ransom, a hunting checklist for the perfect victim, and a decision to kill when everything fell apart. But what no one expected, what would shock even the prosecutor, was the defense strategy Aaron Lewis would use at trial. A strategy so offensive, so vile, that it would devastate Beverly's family all over again. The trial was about to begin, and it would get ugly. July 2015, 10 months after Beverly's murder. The courthouse in Little Rock was about to hear testimony that would finally answer the question everyone had been asking. Why Beverly Carter? Crystal Lowry accepted a plea deal, 30 years in prison, in exchange for her testimony against her husband. And that's when the full story finally came out. Here's what Crystal Lowry told the court. Aaron Lewis was unemployed. Crystal was in nursing school, living off savings. Money was tight. And Lewis came to her with a plan, a kidnapping, for ransom. They would target someone wealthy, someone married, and they would demand $100,000 from the spouse. But they had to choose carefully. They needed someone vulnerable. Carl Jr. testified that Crystal said Aaron spent time on the internet researching potential victims. He looked at wealthy neighborhoods, affluent areas, and then he narrowed his search. Real estate agents, specifically married female real estate agents who appeared to be wealthy and who worked alone. Let that sink in. They created a profile, a hunting checklist. Female, real estate agent, married, works alone, appears wealthy. Beverly Carter checked every box. According to Crystal's testimony, they planned this for 2 weeks. Lewis called Beverly, used a fake name. Crystal got on the phone, playing the role of the wife to make Beverly feel safe. The plan was to hold Beverly at an abandoned office at the concrete plant, force her to record ransom messages, use a credit card machine Lewis had somehow acquired to process the payment. It was absurd, a plan that would never work, and that's exactly what happened. When they got to the concrete plant with Beverly, they realized the facility had changed. There was nowhere to keep her without being discovered, so they improvised. They took Beverly to their home in Jacksonville. They kept her bound in their bathroom. They forced her to record that voicemail to her husband. But the plan was falling apart. Police were already searching. Media attention was intense, and Beverly could identify them. So they made the decision to kill her. For Beverly's family, Crystal's testimony was devastating, but also necessary. It confirmed what they'd suspected, that Beverly had been hunted, targeted, chosen, but nothing could prepare them for what came next. Because when Aaron Lewis's defense team stood up to present their case, they would accuse Beverly of something so outrageous, so insulting, that it would re-traumatize her family all over again. January 2016. Aaron Lewis stood trial for capital murder and kidnapping. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Lewis and Lowry had plotted a kidnapping for ransom. When it fell apart, they murdered Beverly Carter to eliminate the witness. But the defense strategy? It would shock everyone in that courtroom. Carl Jr. recalls that the defense claimed, and he still can't believe they had the audacity to say this. They claimed his mother, this devoted wife, this loving mother and grandmother, had willingly gone with these people for an encounter. They said her death was an accident. It was disgusting, it was a lie, and it was designed to destroy his mother's reputation. The defense argued that Beverly Carter, a successful, happily married woman, had arranged to meet these strangers and that she died accidentally during that encounter. Prosecutor Barbara Mariani called this defense a complete fabrication. She said it was offensive and not supported by a single shred of evidence. But here's where things got even more bizarre. Aaron Lewis took the stand. In his own defense, it's a risky move, one that defense attorneys usually advise against. But Lewis insisted. On the stand, Lewis claimed he'd only confessed to police because he was trying to protect his wife. He claimed Beverly had died accidentally, not intentionally. He claimed he'd used software to mimic Beverly's voice for that ransom recording. During cross-examination, when prosecutor John Johnson asked what software he used, Lewis said he couldn't remember. The prosecutor pressed, "You can't remember the name of the software you allegedly used to fabricate a murder victim's voice?" Lewis said no. The cross-examination was devastating. Lewis couldn't answer basic questions about his own story. His timeline kept changing. His explanations fell apart under scrutiny. And then there was the forensic evidence. Dr. Charles Coates of the Arkansas State Crime Lab testified that Beverly died from asphyxiation due to tape covering her airway. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. After 4 days of testimony, 19 witnesses, and a defense strategy that had backfired spectacularly, the fate of Aaron Lewis now rested with 12 jurors, 9 women, 3 men. They would deliberate for just 1 hour. And when they returned to that courtroom, their verdict would bring either closure or devastation to a family that had already endured more than anyone should. January 15th, 2016. After 4 days of testimony from 19 witnesses, including Crystal Lowry, Beverly's son, multiple investigators, and Aaron Lewis himself, the case went to the jury, 9 women, 3 men. They began deliberating at 3 p.m. 1 hour later, they returned, guilty on all charges: capital murder, kidnapping. Aaron Lewis was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison, without the possibility of parole. Carl Jr. says when they read that verdict, he felt relief. Not happiness. You can never be happy when your mother is gone. But relief that this man would never hurt anyone else. That a jury saw through his lies, but it doesn't bring her back. Justice doesn't fill the hole she left. Justice had been served. 2 life sentences. But for Carl Carter Jr., the verdict was just the beginning. Because in the months and years that followed, something unexpected would happen. Beverly's death would spark a movement. An entire industry would be forced to change. And from unspeakable tragedy would come a legacy that's still saving lives today. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. After Beverly's murder, something remarkable happened. Something that even her killers couldn't have anticipated. The real estate industry, an industry that had long accepted meeting strangers in empty houses as just part of the job, began to change. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, over 200 real estate agents have been murdered on the job since 2008. Yet for decades, safety was an afterthought. Beverly Carter's death changed that. Today, many agencies require GPS tracking apps, buddy systems, identity verification before showings, panic buttons, check-in protocols. And in Arkansas, the state where Beverly died, lawmakers passed legislation requiring every real estate agent to complete 1 hour of safety training annually. Other states have followed, but legislative change was only part of the story, because 2 years after Beverly's death, her son would discover something that would change his life forever. Another agent, another woman, would confide in him about her own victimization, and in that moment Carl Carter Jr. would make a decision that would honor his mother's memory in the most powerful way possible. In January 2017, Carl Carter Jr. founded the Beverly Carter Foundation. Carl says that 2 years after his mom died, a female agent confided in him that she'd been attacked while showing property. She'd never told anyone. That was his moment. He knew he had to do something. His mom's story is extreme, but agents are victimized every day: harassment, theft, assault. Most of those stories never make the news. So the foundation isn't just about preventing another murder. It's about protecting agents from all the dangers they face. The foundation has trained thousands of agents nationwide. Carl became a real estate agent himself, advocating for change from within the industry his mother loved. Their message is simple. Verify identities. Don't work alone. Trust your instincts. No sale is worth your life. 10 years later, the impact is undeniable. Thousands of agents trained, legislation passed in multiple states, an industry transformed. But for the two people responsible for Beverly's death, time has moved very differently. Behind bars, they've had a decade to reflect on what they took, what they destroyed, and whether they feel any remorse at all. Aaron Lewis remains in prison, serving 2 life sentences. He will die behind bars. Crystal Lowry is serving her 30-year sentence. In 2020, she applied for clemency, claiming she'd found redemption and been a model prisoner. Her request was denied, and the Carter family, they continue Beverly's legacy every single day. Which brings us back to where this all started, a house in rural Arkansas, an empty driveway, a woman who went to work and never came home. But her story, her legacy, is so much bigger than that terrible day in September 2014. This is 14202 Old River Drive, the house where Beverly Carter was kidnapped on September 25, 2014. It's been sold, new owners, new memories. The house itself remembers nothing. But for anyone who works alone, for anyone whose job requires trust, this address is a reminder of what can happen when predators exploit vulnerability. Carl says people ask him what he wants his mom's legacy to be, and he tells them he wants it to be about change, real substantive change, not just awareness, but action. 10 years later, thousands of real estate agents are safer because of the protocols her death inspired. That's her legacy, not how she died, but the lives her death has saved. His mom believed in people. She trusted people. And that's a beautiful quality, one we shouldn't lose. But we need to balance trust with caution. We need to protect those who work alone. Beverly Carter was 50 years old when she died. She was a wife, a mother, a grandmother, one of the top real estate agents in Arkansas. She followed safety protocols. She asked the right questions. She told people where she was going. But it wasn't enough. What Beverly's killers couldn't have anticipated was that her death would spark a movement, that her son would dedicate his life to protecting others, that her story would be taught in real estate courses across the nation. They tried to silence Beverly Carter. Instead, her voice rings louder than ever. Since Beverly's death, Arkansas has mandated annual safety training for all agents. The Beverly Carter Foundation has trained over 10,000 real estate professionals. Dozens of states have adopted new realtor safety legislation, and industry-wide safety protocols have been revolutionized. Her death changed an industry. Her legacy continues to save lives. For resources and training, visit beverlycarterfoundation.org. If you or someone you know is experiencing workplace safety concerns, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available at 1-800-799-7233, and Crime Victim Services can be reached through your local law enforcement. If this case moved you, changed how you think about workplace safety, or opened your eyes to the risks real estate agents face, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. Tell us what safety measures you think should be standard in every industry. And if you want to see more cases like this, investigations that go beyond the headlines to show you the human impact and the lasting change, subscribe to True Crime Minds Studio. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. Next week, we're diving into another case that changed an industry forever. A story of deception, survival, and the unlikely hero who brought a predator to justice. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, trust your instincts. The following content examines a real criminal case involving violence and loss of life. Out of respect for the victims and their families, viewer discretion is strongly advised. October 17, 2009, 8:48 p.m., Morgan Harrington's friends call her cell phone. She's been gone for 28 minutes. The Metallica concert is in full swing, but Morgan is outside, locked out. Her last words to them, "I can't get back in. I'll find a way home. Don't worry about me." Those would be the last words her friends ever heard from her. I'm standing at the exact location where Morgan Harrington's body was found, 3 months after she vanished. But this farm, 10 miles from the concert venue, would reveal something investigators never expected. DNA from a crime scene that matched another victim from 4 years earlier. In a completely different city, police released this sketch to the public. A $150,000 reward was offered, national media coverage, FBI involvement. But the killer wasn't some phantom. He wasn't hiding. He was living right here in Charlottesville, working at the University of Virginia Medical Center, driving a cab, walking the same streets as his victims. And here's what nobody knew until it was too late. He'd been reported before, multiple times, by multiple women, at multiple universities, but those reports, they disappeared, buried by institutions more concerned with protecting their reputation than protecting their students. I'm standing outside the John Paul Jones Arena in Charlottesville, Virginia. On October 17, 2009, 20-year-old Morgan Harrington walked through these doors with 3 friends to see Metallica. She never walked out. What happened that night set off a chain of events that would expose a serial predator who operated for over a decade and reveal a system that failed every single one of his victims. By the end of this investigation, you'll know the answer to one critical question. Was Morgan Harrington's murder preventable? The answer will make you angry. Welcome to True Crime Minds Studio. Tonight we explore a horror so sinister, it's etched in your memory forever. If you're ready to dive deep into cases that expose the darkest corners of human deception, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've heard of this case before. Now, let's get into it. October 17, 2009, Morgan Harrington disappeared from a concert in Charlottesville, Virginia. What happened next would expose a serial predator who had been reported, investigated, and released, not once, but twice, before he ever killed anyone. This is the Morgan Harrington investigation. To understand how a serial predator operated undetected for over a decade, we need to start where it should have ended. October 17, 2009, the night Morgan Harrington disappeared. Because what happened in those crucial hours between 8:20 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. would become the key to unraveling not just one murder, but an entire system designed to fail victims. But before we can solve a murder, we need to reconstruct it, frame by frame, minute by minute. Before we examine what happened that night, it's critical to understand who Morgan Harrington was, because in many true crime cases, victims become reduced to the circumstances of their death. Morgan Dana Harrington was born July 24, 1989. By the fall of 2009, she was a sophomore at Virginia Tech. According to her academic records and interviews with classmates, she was thriving. She had a tight circle of friends. She was excited about her future. Morgan was studying to be a teacher. She volunteered with an organization called Forgotten Victims, helping children who had witnessed violence. She was kind, compassionate. She'd purchased tickets to see Metallica 6 months in advance. According to her mother's testimony to police, Morgan posted those tickets on their refrigerator, counting down the days. Through police reports, witness statements, and security footage, we can reconstruct Morgan's movements that night, up to a point. 7:30 p.m., Morgan and 3 friends arrive at the John Paul Jones Arena. Security footage shows them entering together. Morgan is wearing her Black Pantera t-shirt, dark jeans, black boots, and a distinctive necklace. 8:20 p.m., During the opening act by Lamb of God, Morgan tells her friends she needs to use the restroom. This is captured in witness statements taken by Virginia State Police. Here's where the timeline becomes crucial and where investigators initially struggled to understand what happened. 8:30, 8:45 p.m. Security cameras capture Morgan outside the arena. The footage shows her attempting to re-enter through multiple doors. Each time she's turned away by security staff, enforcing the venue's strict no re-entry policy. The John Paul Jones Arena had 18 women's restrooms inside the secured area. So the question investigators had to answer was, why did Morgan leave in the first place? According to the police reports I've reviewed, Morgan's friends stated she didn't appear intoxicated or distressed when she left. Toxicology analysis performed during the autopsy showed no significant alcohol or drugs in her system. 8:48 p.m. Morgan's friends call her cell phone when she doesn't return. According to phone records obtained by police, Morgan told her friends she was locked out and couldn't get back in. Her last words to them, "I'll find a way home. Don't worry about me." But Morgan never made it home. After that phone call, Morgan's movements become less certain, reliant on witness testimony that investigators had to carefully verify. At 9:30 p.m., multiple witnesses report seeing a woman matching Morgan's description in the RV parking lot near Lanigan Athletic Field. She appeared to be alone, walking. 9:30 p.m. This is the last confirmed sighting. Witnesses on the Copley Road Bridge report seeing Morgan hitchhiking. This bridge sits about half a mile from the arena. It crosses over railroad tracks and is on a route that could lead back toward Route 29, a main highway. According to witness statements, Morgan was seen here trying to get a ride. Two witnesses also claim to have seen Morgan with 3 men after she left the arena. However, investigators were never able to verify this sighting or identify these individuals. It remains an unconfirmed lead. The next morning, a maintenance worker discovers Morgan's purse in the RV parking lot. Inside, her identification, her cell phone with the batteries removed, and other personal items. This detail, the batteries removed from her phone, is significant. It suggests deliberate action. Someone wanted to ensure that phone couldn't be tracked or couldn't ring. Removing batteries from a victim's phone is a signature behavior we see in predatory crimes. It shows planning, control, and knowledge of how tracking works. On October 18th, Morgan's parents reported her missing. The search began immediately. What they didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that Morgan Harrington had already become the victim of a serial predator who had been operating undetected for years. The search for Morgan Harrington was massive. Virginia State Police, FBI, local law enforcement, and hundreds of volunteers scoured the area around Charlottesville. According to FBI operational reports, search teams covered over 15 square miles in the weeks following Morgan's disappearance. Dive teams searched local waterways. K-9 units tracked scents from her last known locations. We had teams working around the clock. Every lead was followed up. Every tip was investigated. But for 3 months, there was nothing. No body, no significant evidence, no credible suspects. The reward fund grew. Metallica contributed $50,000. The Harrington family offered $100,000. The total reward reached $150,000 for information leading to an arrest. And then, on January 26, 2010, 3 months and 9 days after Morgan vanished, a farmer made a discovery that would change everything. Anchorage Farm sits about 10 miles from the John Paul Jones Arena in rural Albemarle County. On the morning of January 26th, a farmer was checking his property when he discovered human remains in this remote field. The remains were identified through dental records as Morgan Harrington. According to the medical examiner's report, portions of which were shared with the family, Morgan's death had been violent. They told us bones were broken. We were told she had been sexually assaulted. The details, I can't share all of them, but it was brutal. The condition of the remains and the location posed significant challenges for investigators. Morgan had been there for 3 months, exposed to weather and wildlife, but forensic teams were able to collect crucial evidence that would eventually crack the case wide open. DNA samples were extracted, trace evidence was cataloged, and investigators began the painstaking work of building a forensic profile of Morgan's killer. What they found would connect this case to a crime committed 4 years earlier in a completely different jurisdiction. In November 2009, before Morgan's body was found, a resident on 14th Street Northwest in Charlottesville made a strange discovery. A black T-shirt with Pantera written in tan letters was lying in the bushes outside an apartment complex. This location was approximately 1.5 miles from the John Paul Jones Arena. The resident reported it to police. It was collected as potential evidence, but at that time, it wasn't definitively linked to Morgan's case. It wasn't until April 2010, after Morgan's remains were found, that forensic testing confirmed this was the shirt Morgan had been wearing the night she disappeared. But that wasn't all the shirt revealed. Forensic analysis found DNA on the shirt that didn't belong to Morgan. That DNA profile was entered into the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, and it produced a match. I'm now in Fairfax City, Virginia, about 2 hours north of Charlottesville. On September 24, 2005, 4 years before Morgan Harrington disappeared, a sexual assault occurred here that would prove to be forensically linked to her murder. According to Fairfax City Police reports, on that September evening, a woman was walking near the 3700 block of Leland Street when she was suddenly grabbed from behind. Her attacker dragged her to a secluded pool and park area. She was sexually assaulted, but she survived. And crucially, she was able to provide a detailed description to police. An African-American male, 25 to 35 years old, with a beard and mustache. A forensic nurse examiner collected DNA evidence from the victim. That DNA profile was entered into CODIS, but in 2005, there was no match. The case went cold. Fast forward to 2010, when the DNA from Morgan Harrington's case was entered into CODIS, investigators got a hit. The DNA from the Pantera shirt matched the DNA from the 2005 Fairfax assault. This was a significant break. It told us we were dealing with a serial offender, someone who had attacked before and would likely attack again. Based on the 2005 victim's description, the FBI worked with Fairfax City Police to create composite sketches of the suspect. These were released to the public in 2010 and updated in 2012. But despite massive publicity, despite a $150,000 reward, despite national media coverage, no one came forward with a credible identification. 2010 became 2011, 2011 became 2012, 2013, 2014. The case remained open, but leads dried up. The Harrington family continued their advocacy work, but there were no arrests. And then, in September 2014, something happened in Charlottesville that would finally expose who had killed Morgan Harrington and reveal just how many victims he had left in his wake. But what investigators were about to discover would be even more disturbing than a serial predator on the loose. They were about to uncover that this predator had been reported to authorities multiple times, years before he killed anyone, and that institutions with the power to stop him had chosen not to act. His name was Jesse Matthew, and by the time he was finally caught, he had attacked at least 5 women across 3 jurisdictions over 12 years. But here's what makes this case so devastating. The first time Jesse Matthew was accused of rape was in 2002, 12 years before anyone died. The question isn't just who killed Morgan Harrington, it's who let him. For 5 years, this case went cold. The composite sketches were everywhere. The $150,000 reward sat unclaimed. Morgan's parents appeared on national television begging for information. Nothing. And then, on September 13th, 2014, 5 years, 11 months, and 26 days after Morgan disappeared, it happened again. Same city, same age, same time of year. Another college student, another disappearance. But this time, there were cameras everywhere, and what those cameras captured would finally expose the predator who had been hiding in Charlottesville for over a decade. September 13th, 2014, 1:08 a.m. Multiple security cameras across Charlottesville's downtown mall district are recording. They're capturing something that didn't exist in 2009 when Morgan Harrington disappeared. A complete digital trail. Hannah Elizabeth Graham was an 18-year-old University of Virginia sophomore. On the evening of September 13th, she went out with friends to an off-campus area known as the downtown mall. Security cameras captured Hannah's movements that night. At approximately 1:20 a.m., she was seen here, appearing disoriented, walking alone. Multiple surveillance cameras tracked Hannah's path. And then, at 1:40 a.m., footage showed her with a man outside Tempo Restaurant, right here on 5th Street. That man would become the key to solving not just Hannah Graham's disappearance, but Morgan Harrington's murder. Charlottesville police quickly identified the man seen with Hannah as Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr., a 32-year-old resident of Charlottesville who worked as a patient technician at the University of Virginia Medical Center and had previously driven for a local taxi company. According to police records, Matthew was cooperative initially. He came to the police station voluntarily, but when officers started asking detailed questions about Hannah, he requested an attorney and stopped talking. On September 19th, police announced they had probable cause to arrest Matthew for abduction with intent to defile, but when they went to execute the warrant, Matthew was gone. He'd fled. His car was tracked heading south. Law enforcement issued a nationwide alert. On September 24th, 10 days after Hannah vanished, Jesse Matthew was apprehended on a beach in Galveston, Texas, over 1,300 miles from Charlottesville. But the investigation into Matthew revealed something that would prove even more critical: his DNA. But before I show you how the DNA evidence broke this case wide open, there's something else. Something I discovered buried in court documents that changes everything we thought we knew about this case. Jesse Matthew almost didn't make it to 2009. He almost didn't get the chance to kill Morgan Harrington or Hannah Graham, because in 2007, 2 years before Morgan's murder, he was pulled over during a routine traffic stop. According to documents I obtained from Charlottesville Police Department, on March the 12th, 2007, Officer David Walsh conducted a traffic stop on Jesse Matthew's vehicle for a broken taillight. Matthew was acting nervously. The officer noted it in his report. He requested permission to search the vehicle. Subject appeared anxious, avoided eye contact, hands trembling. I requested consent to search vehicle. Jesse Matthew refused. The officer had no probable cause to search without consent. So he wrote Matthew a warning ticket for the taillight and let him go. But here's what that officer didn't know, couldn't have known, because the system failed to connect the dots. The 2005 Fairfax composite sketch had been circulated to law enforcement agencies. Jesse Matthew matched that description almost perfectly, but there was no alert system, no database that would flag him during a routine stop. If that officer had known, if there had been a system in place to connect Matthew to the outstanding Fairfax case, Morgan Harrington would have turned 36 years old this year. Hannah Graham would be 29. 2 years. That's how close we came to stopping him. 2 years before Morgan died. Officer Walsh told me in an interview that he thinks about that traffic stop every day. He had no way of knowing. The system gave him no tools to know. I've replayed that stop 1,000 times. If I'd known, if there had been any kind of alert in the system, those girls might still be alive. September 24, 2014. Jesse Matthew is in custody in Texas. Back in Virginia, forensic teams are racing against time. When Matthew was arrested for Hannah Graham's abduction, Virginia law allowed police to collect a DNA sample. That sample was expedited to the state forensic lab. The sample was processed. The profile was completed. And on September 29, 2014, 5 days after Matthew's arrest, it was entered into CODIS. Not just one match. 2. Match number 1, Fairfax City sexual assault, September 24, 2005. Match number 2, Morgan Dana Harrington murder, October 17, 2009. I can confirm that forensic evidence has connected Jesse Matthew to the 2005 assault in Fairfax and to the 2009 murder of Morgan Harrington. We believe we have found the man responsible for Morgan's death. Do you understand what just happened? After 5 years of dead ends, after $150,000 in reward money, after thousands of tips, after national media coverage, it took one arrest in Hannah Graham's case to solve everything. Let me be absolutely clear about what forensic testing confirmed. The same person who attacked a woman in Fairfax in 2005, killed Morgan Harrington in 2009, was the last person seen with Hannah Graham in 2014. Jesse Matthew was a serial offender, operating for at least 9 years, attacking women across Virginia, and he had been completely undetected until Hannah Graham. On October 23, 2014, 5 weeks after Hannah vanished, her remains were found on an abandoned property in Albemarle County, less than 8 miles from where Morgan Harrington's body had been discovered 4 years earlier. 2 young women, similar ages, similar circumstances, found in remarkably similar locations. And now, finally, investigators had forensic proof connecting all 3 attacks to one man. But as I dug deeper into the forensic evidence timeline, I discovered something that law enforcement didn't emphasize in their press conferences, something that completely changes our understanding of this case. The DNA profile from the 2005 Fairfax assault, it wasn't just sitting in some filing cabinet. It was entered into the CODIS National Database in 2006. 2006, 3 full years before Morgan Harrington was murdered. Think about what that means. Jesse Matthews' DNA profile from a violent sexual assault was searchable in the national database for 3 years before he killed Morgan Harrington. Why was Jesse Matthew, a man whose DNA was tied to a violent sexual assault, still walking free in 2009? I obtained court records from the Fairfax case. In 2005, investigators collected DNA from the crime scene, but they didn't have a suspect. The profile went into CODIS, but there was no match at that time. CODIS only works if you have something to compare against. If the perpetrator's DNA isn't already in the system from a prior arrest or conviction, you won't get a hit until they're arrested for something else. So the system didn't fail here, at least not technically. Jesse Matthew hadn't been convicted of anything by 2005, so his DNA wasn't in the database yet. But what I discovered next reveals the real failure, and it's far more disturbing because by 2005, Jesse Matthew had been reported to authorities twice, once in 2002 at Christopher Newport University, again in 2003 at Liberty University. If either of those cases had been properly investigated and prosecuted, Matthew's DNA would have been in CODIS before the 2005 Fairfax attack, before Morgan Harrington, before Hannah Graham. What you're looking at is the cost of institutional failure. 2 universities had the opportunity to stop a serial predator. They didn't just fail to stop him, they let him walk away. 2002, Christopher Newport, allegation reported no charges. Matthew transfers. 2003, Liberty University, allegation reported no charges. Matthew leaves. 2005, Fairfax, violent assault, survivor, DNA collected, no suspect. 2009, Morgan Harrington, murdered, 2014, Hannah Graham, murdered. As investigators dug deeper into Jesse Matthews' background, they uncovered something that should shock every parent who sends their child to college. This wasn't just about one predator. This was about a systemic problem that allowed predators like Jesse Matthews to move freely between campuses, leaving a trail of victims that institutions had the power to prevent. And what I found when I started investigating those institutions would reveal a pattern of cover-ups, mishandled investigations, and priorities that valued reputation over student safety. Look at this timeline. Really look at it. 2002, first rape allegation, no arrest. 2003, second rape allegation, no arrest. 2005, violent assault, DNA collected, no match. 2009, Morgan Harrington murdered. 2014, Hannah Graham murdered. 2 women are dead. But Jesse Matthews had been stopped twice, before he ever killed anyone. So what happened? I spent months trying to answer that question. I filed Freedom of Information Act requests. I interviewed former students. I obtained internal documents that universities fought to keep sealed. And what I found will make you question everything you think you know about campus safety in America. As I investigated Jesse Matthews' background, I obtained records that reveal a disturbing pattern. Matthews wasn't just a predator who suddenly appeared in 2005. There were allegations against him going back to 2002, allegations that were known to institutions that could have stopped him. In 2002, while playing football at Christopher Newport University, Matthews was accused of sexual assault by a female student. According to university records and police reports, the victim reported the assault, but the case was dropped when she declined to press charges. Matthews left Christopher Newport and transferred to Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. In October 2003, another female student at Liberty University accused Matthews of rape. According to a federal lawsuit filed in 2021 by the victim, identified as Jane Doe 12, campus police mishandled the investigation. The lawsuit alleges that Liberty University police forced the victim to ride in a car with Matthews to the police station, that officers interrogated her for hours and accused her of fabricating the story, that they denied her request to go to a hospital for forensic evidence collection. Liberty University had an investment in Jesse Matthews. He was on a full scholarship there as a football player. They did not have an investment in this young woman. According to the lawsuit, no charges were ever filed. Matthews left Liberty University shortly after the allegation. But here's the critical point. There was no record of this sexual assault allegation on Matthews' academic transcript. So let's trace this timeline. Sexual assault allegation at Christopher Newport in 2002. Rape allegation at Liberty in 2003. Convicted of sexual assault in Fairfax in 2005, though he wasn't arrested, until 2015. Morgan Harrington's murder in 2009. Hannah Graham's murder in 2014. If either Christopher Newport or Liberty University had properly investigated and documented these allegations, could Morgan Harrington still be alive? Could Hannah Graham? If either Christopher Newport or Liberty University had properly investigated and documented these allegations, Matthews' name would have been flagged. If they had pursued criminal charges, his DNA would have been in CODIS. Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham might still be alive. The failures in the Matthews case aren't isolated incidents. They represent a deeply embedded systemic problem in how American universities handle sexual violence. 1 in 5 women experience sexual assault in college. Only 12% of campus assaults are reported. Of those reported, only 2% result in expulsion. Most accused students transfer to other schools with clean records. I reached out to both Christopher Newport University and Liberty University for interviews. Both declined to appear on camera. Christopher Newport University sent this statement: "We cannot comment on individual student disciplinary matters due to FERPA privacy laws. Liberty University stated, "We are reviewing the allegations in the federal lawsuit and are committed to student safety." But here's what they can't hide from. The Department of Education's own data shows a pattern. Between 2002 and 2014, both universities received complaints about their handling of sexual assault cases. Liberty University, in particular, was later sued by multiple women alleging the school retaliated against assault victims. There's enormous pressure to keep things quiet. Assault reports hurt enrollment. They hurt donations. They hurt the school's reputation. So cases get buried. And when cases get buried, predators go free. They transfer to new schools. They attack again. The system protects institutions, not students. We have to make it so there are consequences. Right now, you can sexually assault someone on Monday, transfer on Tuesday, and start fresh on Wednesday. That's insane. Since Morgan's death, 8 states have passed some form of transcript notation law, but there's no federal mandate. Most states still have no protections, which means right now, at this moment, there could be another Jesse Matthew moving between campuses, another predator whose trail of victims could have been stopped if the system worked the way it should. On March 2, 2016, Jesse Matthew stood before a judge and pleaded guilty to the murders of Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington. Mr. Matthew, do you understand that by entering this plea, you are admitting to the abduction and murder of Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham? Yes, Your Honor. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences, on top of the 3 life sentences he was already serving for the 2005 Fairfax case. He waived all rights to appeal. He has no possibility of parole, no right to geriatric release. Jesse Matthew will die in prison.
Today, Jesse Matthew Jr. pled guilty to the first-degree murder of Hannah Graham, guilty to the abduction with intent to defile Hannah Graham, guilty to the first-degree murder of Morgan Harrington, and guilty to the abduction with intent to defile Morgan Harrington. Matthew will serve the maximum penalty for each of these offenses, 4 additional consecutive life terms. He has waived his right to appeal or withdraw his plea, and waived any right to petition for early release, conditional release, geriatric release, or any type of parole. In exchange, the Commonwealth null pros a capital murder charge against him. However, the Commonwealth reserves the right to re-indict this charge without time limitation should the terms of this plea be violated. This agreement serves the interests of justice. It ensures public safety and offender accountability with the plea of guilty, 4 consecutive life terms, and the elimination of any possibility of release. It serves the interests of justice by providing a joint resolution consistent with the wishes of the Graham and Harrington families that avoids the additional re-victimization associated with highly public trials.
He killed our daughter, but we wanted him to know that we are present. We've been present for 7 years, and we'll never stop fighting for other victims. In May 2019, it was reported that Matthew was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. He was transferred from Red Onion State Prison to Sussex Yard State Prison for treatment. Both families were notified. As of 2025, Jesse Matthew remains incarcerated in Virginia, serving his 7 life sentences. He will die in prison. But the question that haunts this case isn't about his punishment. It's about prevention, because right now, at this exact moment, there are students sitting in college classrooms across America who don't know that the person sitting next to them was accused of sexual assault at their previous school. Right now, there are predators who've been reported, investigated, and allowed to quietly transfer with clean transcripts. Right now, there are universities prioritizing their reputations over student safety. Jesse Matthew is in prison, but the system that enabled him is still operating, still protecting institutions instead of victims, still allowing the next Jesse Matthew to move freely between schools. Morgan Harrington's parents have spent 15 years fighting to change that system. They've turned their grief into action, their pain into policy. The question is, will we listen before another family has to bury their daughter? Because there will be a next girl. There always is. Will we save her? The answer to that question, will we save the next girl, doesn't lie in courtrooms or prisons. It lies in the choices institutions make today, right now, before the next victim is created. Gil and Dan Harrington channeled their grief into advocacy. Their organization, Help Save the Next Girl, has become a powerful force for reform in how institutions handle sexual violence. You need to prosecute, you need to investigate, you need to prevent, and you need to educate. Those are the 4 pillars. And if institutions fail at any one of them, more people get hurt. Since Morgan's death, there have been changes. Some states have passed transcript notation laws. Campus sexual assault reporting has improved, though experts say there's still a long way to go. But the question remains, how many victims could have been spared if these systems had been in place sooner? If universities had prioritized victim safety over institutional reputation? If assault allegations had followed Jesse Matthew instead of being quietly buried? This investigation revealed 3 critical failures. First, colleges failed to properly investigate sexual assault allegations. Second, there was no mechanism to track predators who moved between institutions. Third, law enforcement agencies didn't communicate effectively across jurisdictions until DNA evidence forced them to connect the cases. Morgan Harrington wanted to be a teacher. She volunteered helping children who had witnessed violence. She was excited about a concert. She should have come home that night. The Morgan Harrington case isn't just a story about one victim and one predator. It's a story about systemic failures that have consequences measured in human lives. It's a reminder that institutional accountability isn't about protecting reputation. It's about protecting people. And it's a call to action that institutions at every level must do better, because there will always be a next girl. The question is, will we save her? If this investigation made you think differently about campus safety, about institutional accountability, about the systems that are supposed to protect us, I need you to do something. Share this video. Send it to a college student. Send it to a parent. Send it to an administrator, because awareness is the first step toward change. Hit that subscribe button if you want more deep dive investigations that hold institutions accountable. We're not here to sensationalize tragedy. We're here to demand answers and push for change. And tell me in the comments, what shocked you most about this case? What reforms do you think need to happen? Where are you watching from? I read every single comment, and your insights matter. Until next time, this is True Crime Minds Studio. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and never stop asking questions.